Good evening and welcome to Athens City Council. It's Monday, November 13th, 2017 at 7 p.m. Tonight we're going to have a public hearing, several committee meetings, and then we'll also be reading our ordinances that we have in the works for legislation. The first item is the public hearing, and this is for the Madison Heights rezoning of property located on the corner of East State Street and Madison Avenue. And we're having this public hearing prior to our reading the ordinance that will be introduced tonight by Councilmember Fall. And what's happening with this is a minor subdivision. It's at the corner of Madison Heights and East State Street, Madison Avenue, excuse me. And as part of this, there will be a rezoning, and it changes the current B1, the business zoning district of this 1.18 acre lot, to two parcels. And it's rezoned to an R1, which is a one-family. Two parcels are rezoned to R3, which are multifamily, and one parcel will be rezoned R1 with a portion set aside as open space. And that's in accordance with the Planning Commission's recommendation. So I know that the developers, Mr. Bloom, is here tonight with us, and we're here to answer any questions that the audience might have or to hear any comments that might be made about this proposal. And I'm hoping everybody signed in as part of the public hearing. Sometimes our public hearings are short because there have been presentations. I know Mr. Sol and Bloom have been to see us twice. They've been here twice. They've also been to the Planning Commission several times. So there's been a fair amount of explanation. Mayor Patterson.
Just the sign-in sheet. Has it worked its way all around through the room? Okay.
Okay. I'll make one last call for any comments or questions. Okay. We will consider the public hearing closed at 7:03 p.m. We'll now move on to our three committee meetings, the first one being Planning and Development Committee, and this is chaired by Councilmember Fall.
Thank you. First on our agenda is a report from the Economic Development Commission, which is stated to be rescheduled because the person has let us know that she has the flu. So the flu is going out already around there. So I hope she gets better, and we will reschedule with her. Second part is the AEP, the perennial AEP franchise agreement. I can turn that over to people who negotiate that and are the ones who are on the ground when it has to be applied. Thank you. Administration.
This is basically what you're looking at is the same ordinance from 2012. This was ordinance 59-12. Really don't see a need for a whole lot of changes in it. This includes the tree trimming as well as the right-of-way.
They haven't been doing much tree trimming as they had before we changed the ordinance around because they were having some difficulties cleaning up after themselves in people's yards and stuff. So I think that if they have been doing tree trimming, I haven't heard about it, which is probably means that it's either not going on a whole lot or they've been doing a better job about how to approach it.
I think it's a little bit more selective as well because there is trimming that goes on, but it's not as devastating, shall I say, as it had been in the past?
Yeah.
Severe?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, there were a couple of years there where they really did a hatchet job. So I don't, maybe the negotiations and our constant concern forwarded to them has helped. Is there any questions concerning this?
This will be just a one-year renewal that will continue down that path for a while yet.
I think that's a good thing because that way we can really get on top of it if something does change mid-year. So, thank you. Next is the domestic registry requirements, which has been put into my committee because the committee it was originally brought under no longer exists. So it's a change in the code. So that's why it's in my committee, though it has nothing really to do with planning or development. Domestic partnership is our what we did many years ago to get around the fact that the state was being very difficult about same-sex marriage. So basically, this will change that ordinance, which is Chapter 3.11, Section 31101, definitions, and 31102, criteria. And it's just adding the words financial obligations under, for purposes of this chapter, the following terms shall mean as follows. So it's a definitional change.
There is another change, I believe, if you go on for that particular section in code, to where it does define a length of time. It reads as both individuals have shared a common residence for 6 months and do intend to do so indefinitely. So there was no length of time in which someone could qualify as in a domestic partnership relationship. And so this fits with, as our HR director has indicated, a lot of other municipalities have 6 months as kind of a definition for a starting point for a domestic partnership.
I have a question. Thank you. It is not necessary, you took the not out, but necessary that both domestic partners have title to the property. So that would be on the lease as well if it was a rental. So that they would both need to be on the lease.
Right.
I don't think a lot of people think about that. That's why I thought I'd bring that up. So is that what that means?
You know, if I'm not mistaken, the law director did review these changes. There has to be some documentation that shows that they are in a domestic partnership, or that there is a partnership there, and that, again, the 6 month qualifier, as well as some level of showing that you are cohabitating.
Or it could be also insurance, if they have rental insurance.
It has to show some level of financial obligation on both parties' part.
So I just think that's a good one to put out there in terms of probably on a lease. We have a lot of renters, and that wouldn't be, they should both be on the lease, possibly.
It could be shared,
Utility
it could be
bill?
joint utility bill, it could be joint savings or checking account, it could be, there's a lot of ways in which someone can demonstrate that they are.
Well, that would be financial, so under common residence, looks like that would be.
Yeah, right.
Question on
Yes, thank you. Just curious what the justification was for this adjustment to this ordinance?
The justification was basically the way this particular ordinance read in the past was that I'm married, but if I weren't and I started dating someone tomorrow morning, I could qualify as a domestic partnership if all of a sudden we moved in together or we were in a relationship together, without, and this puts at least some timeline of commitment.
I guess you could do the same. I guess I'm trying to argue you could turn around and marry someone shortly after meeting them, less than 6 months. And I'm just trying to understand why the difference in categorizing someone as in a relationship when they're same-sex versus in a marriage where you have a piece of paper.
Well, okay, I understand where you're coming from. With a marriage, now you've got a legal document that the two of you are now married, and so therefore that's fine. You're beyond domestic partnership. You now are married and are married person and married person as a couple, as opposed to this domestic partnership is that you're not necessarily legally bound to each other via matrimony.
So we do open ourselves up to possibly denying someone then recognizing their domestic partnership in the city of Athens if they don't have these things, if they have not been together for 6 months, or if they don't have they're both their names on the lease or mortgage. Okay.
Well, our original actual application does have the language, it never made it into the law, as it were. There was some discussion, people questioning whether or not we needed a domestic partner registry, because you now have the right to marry in the state, any state. So, but we feel being Athens is Athens, that we wanted to continue to offer this. We have domestic partners already as employees in the city. We have employees at the university who've come over to register, and I believe that's kind of what kicked this in. Lisa, do you recall?
I do, and to keep in mind that usually this is used to show your domestic partners for purposes of benefits. So you have this domestic partner registry, and you have the criteria. They can show that they're domestic partners, and they can get health insurance or other benefits.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
It just occurred to me, suppose you have a domestic partnership couple that have been in a domestic partnership relationship, say for 10 years in Columbus, and they moved to Athens. They've been here one day. Now does the clock reset? Interesting. Are they no longer in a domestic partnership according to Athens criteria?
It says that, it's not specific, no 6 months is where they are located. I think this is, the idea is that it's helping to establish that there's some type of contractual relationship.
So they could show something from the city of Columbus, maybe a lease or whatever, or something that showed that they had been together for 6 months. It says to establish a domestic partnership, both individuals must file a declaration of domestic partnership with the city affirming that they meet all of the following qualifications. So it doesn't seem like that would be too hard to come up with that. I mean, I don't know.
I don't believe that it would matter where your domestic partnership started from if you do come to Athens and you're able to show, well, we've been together for a long time and here's proof of that,
Right.
then fine.
Yeah, but I like taking the Talmudic attitude and splitting a hair here, because I could argue it either way. I could say, well, no, it only applies to Athens, or no, it applies to the entire state of Ohio, or it applies anywhere in the United States. I mean,
As it's written now,
as it's written now, I don't know how to interpret it.
it doesn't state where, it just states none.
Right.
And as it comes back to benefits, things are getting very specific. I know we got a letter today from OU that, I mean, we've been married 25 years, but 24 years here in Athens with OU insurance, and they want our marriage certificate now, after all this time. So, I mean, the benefit issue is getting very sticky. And they want our kids' birth certificates. So, I mean,
Is that
we've
legal?
been, 24 years of the same insurance. So I think that more and more people, if you want certain benefits, you have to prove your situation.
And again, this is not out of alignment with other municipalities in the state that have a 6-month minimum,
Other questions? Well, I think that we will go forward with this for first reading in the future. 15 minutes from now. Yes, Steve?
I just want to follow up on something the Service Safety Director stated, and that is that, yes, with finally, legalize marriage for everyone, marriage equality, period, to rescind this right now is, I believe, is the wrong thing to do.
Right.
We're just cleaning up the language in this under this particular piece of legislation, and we'll keep it in place until the rest of the world thinks that everything is safe. And then maybe 10 years down the road, after we're all on to different places, then someone else can relook at this. But I think this is the right thing to do to keep this in place at this point. We're just cleaning it up.
Right. Okay. Other questions, concerns? Great, thank you. Last on our agenda is fracking and industrial brine waste. That is now it will be in the headlines. The state legislature, in their wisdom, is putting forward a bill. It already has a number for House Bill 393, which says basically oil and gas brine sales. The oil and gas would this bill, 393, would authorize a person to sell brine derived from an oil or gas operation that is processed as a commodity to use in surface applications, in de-icing, dust suppression, and other applications. It's like Love Canal all over again. The other one that was down in Missouri that they were using PCB waste to put on their, for dust control. So basically this means that ODOT or the county, the city could go and use brine, injection fluid from oil and gas fracking on the streets. We think that it's bad having it as an injection fluid, putting it kind of out of sight, out of mind. This would open up a whole nother area that would be just so poisonous. So I want to bring forward a ordinance that basically will say that you cannot use industrial waste or commodities thereof industrial waste to do any sort of surface applications in the city. And that will include all surfaces, including sidewalks, bike path, and such. I think it's a separate ordinance is good because it's beyond just the wellhead protection zone. This is everywhere. And we know some of the issues about the injection fluid and how poison it is. And to think that they can make it as a commodity to start spraying it on the freeways and stuff is a really scary thought. So, questions? Michelle?
Thank you, Member Fall, for bringing this forward. I know many of us were notified of this a couple weeks ago that this was being discussed. I had a conversation with our state representative, Mr. Edwards, on Friday, and he had heard some knowledge of it, but didn't know it was actually coming forward. So I asked him to look into that, and he also mentioned several other concerns regarding severance tax and other things. So it seems to be on his radar as our state representative, but not quite to the extent that now we know that it's out of committee.
Right. It is.
It's out of committee. So we also know that surrounding states have had some of this in the past, and many of those states have stopped doing brine on their roads for salt control. So I'm a little confused as to what our state representatives are up to with this, because other than for profit, I can't think of any other reason.
Right.
Obviously not the safety and welfare of the citizens of Ohio,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Right. Well, and I would encourage people to contact both our representatives and our senator. It does not have a Senate bill number yet, but it does have a House bill, which is 393, so people can call their representative, Mr. Edwards, to let them know that this is completely unacceptable. The representatives who introduced it, who sponsored it, are DeVitas and Representative O'Brien, and so you could probably also contact them. Also, I would like whether this city could put forward maybe a letter also from the administration to say, whoa, this is really stupid, in nice political terms.
No, that's fair.
Yeah, it would be a short letter.
Saying stupid isn't a nice political term.
So, yeah, Chris.
Well, and the mayor and I just received an article this week from a professor at the College of Medicine from the Journal of the American Medical Association talking about the damage of the particulate matter, particularly to people who have asthma.
Sure.
So this exacerbates the situation with anybody with that kind of condition.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Right.
so I think it's really important.
I could be way off in left field, but I would really hope that the intent of that bill isn't to just take extract that comes right out of the well and put it in a tank and start spreading it somewhere for brine control. No, I
Right.
remember, Pappy, I know. I scratch my head too. I think as we all do from time to time. And I do want the public to know, or anyone who's watching tonight, to not be confused by what the Ohio Department of Transportation currently uses when they do use any de-icing solutions, that it is not fracking waste that is being put on the highways and the byways around the
Right.
city, so, and around the
Right.
county and the state.
I
But,
think that.
I'd like to believe that there are smart minds out there, and I understand there's someone at Ohio University that's working on some way to detoxify and deradiate this solution to have a brine solution. Now, whether that's used on the roads or not, I don't know. Rather than it constantly being injected into southeastern Ohio and in particular Athens County. But this isn't an out. I'm just saying that
Right.
Hopefully someday down the road there's another way to do all this stuff.
Right, but I think one of the things is, it says basically is processed for a commodity. You could say that them pumping it out of the fracking well is processing. And, even if, I do not think that the level of recycling technology or cleaning, filtering technology is anywhere near making it available as a commodity to spray onto roads, whether it will ever be clean enough. And then there's also what happens with all the stuff that they filter out?
Right.
And is that going to be now something? Yeah, they're solids. Does that mean that they'll be just dumping it in our, landfill, our surface-oriented landfills to end up in runoff? Because it's not.
Right.
It's not designated as a hazardous waste, which is one of the main problems that we have with the injection fluids, is that they don't consider it hazardous waste, even though it has radiation and a whole lot of really toxic chemicals in it. So that was a kind of loophole that was created in the laws. So, any other questions? Great. So I'll bring something for, I'll work with the law director and bring it forward.
All right,
Thank you.
thanks. We'll move on to the
Sure,
Finance and
nope.
Personnel Committee, and this is chaired by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. I just have 3 items to discuss tonight. The first bullet point is municipal court, newly hired clerk of court. The reason it has come before council is we were informed, I believe everyone got an email from our auditor, which states that if the court revenue is less than the operating expenses, the legislative body sets the clerk's salary. Otherwise, the judge sets the amount. And then the appropriate ORC was attached and so on, which is now why it's before us tonight. To speak to the issue, we have His Honor Judge Grace here. If you'd like to say a few words, go to the podium and identify yourself.
Good evening, everyone. I am Todd Grace, Municipal Court Judge, and that is a correct assessment, is that City Council needs to set the amount for the Clerk of Courts. And so what we have done, we had a little bit of a rushed schedule because our clerk and our chief deputy clerk, due to some changes in what was going to be available to them through the retirement system, retired instead of at the end of the year, they retired at the end of October. So instead of having the extra 8 weeks or so, we ended up having to do the appointment quickly. So we already had somebody that had been groomed who came in about 3 years ago who was being trained in how to do the position. So we were ready on that. And what we have done is she and I sat down, went through quite a bit of data. She communicated through the Clerks Association with other clerks and got data for other municipal court clerks of similar size and came up with some averages on how much they were making. Our current clerk has been making 75-ish thousand is what her current salary is. What we determined is that Tanya, we thought a more appropriate salary would be 65. So we're asking City Council to set her salary at 65,000 a year. If there are any questions, I can try to answer this.
Any questions from the committee? Other members of council? Madam President, you have a question?
We do have, what was provided is the Ohio Municipal League salary survey.
I have a copy of that as well. That
So
is
there
a
is-
survey without the data about the size of the court or the size of the counties that are being served. So
Right.
the data that I'm relying upon is actually data that was collected from the Clerks Association that sorts for the information about the size of the court and the county that they're serving, or
So-
the municipality that they're serving.
So you've taken that into consideration? so
As
that
much
it's
as we
more-
could with
yeah.
the data that was available.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Well, my concern from finance and personnel is that given that revenues are down and expenses are up, are you financially capable of handling this expense?
That's a question that is perhaps not phrased the right way.
Okay.
It's the city, the funding authority that funds the court. It's not the revenue that comes in through the court. The revenue coming in through the court is largely determined based on the number of charges that are filed, not something that is controlled by the court. And so by statute, the city, the funding authority, is what pays for it.
Administration?
I would contend as long as the money's there in the budget. And this is less than previously, so one would
Yeah, it's
contend
about
that
$10,000 less than what was being paid to the previous clerk. And we're bringing in somebody with 2 master's degree who has a wealth of experience that allows her to modernize the court in a way that is, it's time for that. And she, in my opinion, is a very good clerk, or clerk in training, now taking over as clerk. I'm excited about what she'll be able to do there.
When do you believe the employee would take effect, starting when?
She's already there.
Oh, okay.
Because Pam retired, I had to appoint to fill the position because we are required to have a clerk, and that meant that she was appointed at the then current salary, which is Pam's salary. So I'm asking City Council to take action and set her salary at 65, effective when you are ready for it to take effect.
Madam President?
This is my ignorance. I'm not sure I understand the difference between the revenue and budget history that was presented that's showing the loss. So if you could explain some of the detail on that. So we were assuming that when we received that financial information that I think was what drew Councilmember Reisner to ask that question about that. So.
Yes, and that was provided to you by the auditor, and that is information about the money that's coming into the court system, and then also the expenses that are going out of the court system. That's part of the budget. And there are differences in the amount that's coming in that has dropped off over recent years, largely due to reduction in cases being filed primarily by Highway Patrol. But again, that's not part of what the court controls, and that is why the court doesn't set salary at this point. If the revenue were higher, then I wouldn't need to ask the City Council to make the decision on what the salary would be.
Councilmember Pappy?
So, wearing the other hat, if there is less activity coming in to the court, do you need less employees or less full-time equivalents, or I don't know.
It's a great question. The answer is not really, because the cases that are not being filed are primarily speeding tickets, stop sign tickets, other violations that are not heavily labor hour intensive. And so the work that was being done was largely for the other cases, the DUIs, the assaults, the domestic violence cases. The reduction in caseload affects the revenue coming in, but not very much. It is a slight amount, but not very much the workload that is needed.
Other questions? Council? See, the auditor is up here. Do you have any comments? Thank you.
Basically, I think some of the numbers I sent you speak for themselves. If you go back through the history, it's a $400,000 change just in the last few years, and that's a lot of money out of the general fund. And I think the issue is that any of us in our budgets, if we don't have as much money from one year to the next, then we need to figure out a way to either bring more money in or reduce our expenses. Just some additional information. Our income tax revenue, which is the largest portion of revenue in the general fund, is only up 1.8% at the previous 1.65%. Now we have the additional 2% that just went on there, but none of that's going into the general fund. And so if we were still at 1.65 and you look at what we brought in last year to this year, less than 2% increase. So when we are looking at additional costs for things, employee raises, which I know we've said this before and everyone knows that personnel is 70 to 80% of the budget. And if you're planning to give a raise next year, then that's going to eat into that too. I don't know what the answer is. I've talked to the judge before about his budget, but as you can see, that's a huge. In my whole time in office, it's never been that. It's been close to $200,000 difference, but never $400,000. And I just think if we weren't worried about the general fund and the unappropriated balance, it would be different. But I am. As you know, it's a huge fund, $15 million fund, and we have about $200,000 that isn't appropriated in some fund. And so I think you have to look at things like that. As far as, employees, the number of employees have gone up in court also since 2012. 13 and 14 had 15 employees. Last year we were up at 19, and this year we're at 17. Employees add up. And then, I don't know, this isn't necessarily my issue, but it is my issue, the appointment letter. This is not a temporary replacement. That position is open. It's not temporary. If you read the other information, I think I sent you the 1901. It says, and we've been doing this for years, the deputy clerk would get paid the higher rate for the time the clerk was on vacation or out sick or on FMLA. But it's not meant to be, temporary permanently. I understand what's happened here is the fact that council needs to set the salary for the new person that it didn't happen before the previous clerk left. So legally, I think that's an issue on how this is being handled, but I just have had brief comments with the law director today, and that's about it. But that's another story, but we're the ones that have to process that for the next payroll. So it's a lot of money for a new person coming in, and so I don't know what else to tell you. I just hope that you'll look closely at all the numbers and compare if you still have your compensation plan and where that position would fit in there. I just personally have a hard time bringing in someone at the same salary as someone with 45 years experience. So, like I said, it'd be different if we had the money, but, general fund revenue is an issue.
Madam President, you had a question?
Well, it's back to the basics again, and I've got to admit that I'm not quite understanding, even from my time on finance and personnel. So you've presented the information to us here with losses since 2013. Are the losses coming out of the general
Yes.
revenue fund?
This is all general fund. The court does have several, and I had a question from another council member about the diversion program and its effect on this. That is its own, it's 232, its own grant fund. But I think that's another issue that's been brought up, and I'm not sure if the judge is still planning to do this, but I think one of the new employees being hired is, the intention was to pay them half out of diversion and half out of the general fund. So those are things that need to be thought about. And I haven't talked to the judge recently, but I did reach out to him last week. So I've included him on anything I put out there. I sent him my response to the other council member. I'm not trying to hide anything. I'm happy to sit down and talk about it. But that's something that probably should have been done before now. And I didn't request it before last week myself, but we have had discussions. You know, mid-year, I started asking what's going on with the revenue. And then just for an aside, it added the diversion fund is, you know, stockpiling money.
Flush.
364,000 unappropriated. I think later in the day, I sent unappropriated balances to people.
did. Thank
So there's a lot of money sitting in that fund. So I wouldn't say
Service
the
Safety Director,
diversion
you have a
program
question?
is-
I think I wanted to clarify something, because I heard it this evening as well, Kathy, that the judge came in and requested $65,000 salary for that individual, so not equal to what the previous
Right.
clerk was making. And I know it says municipal court newly hired clerk of courts, but we've gone to this whole budget of court, and this whole discussion about is the county is supposed to pay a portion of the clerk's
They do pay.
benefits? Oh,
That,
they do?
that
Okay.
salary hourly rate is 60% is what we pay.
Okay.
And
Plus
that-
all the benefits, which I've had this discussion with the law director also, according to the revised code, the county should be helping pay for that.
That's
And
what
are
we
the,
meant.
is the
But how
county
I
paying,
can get them to do that, I'm not sure.
They're not
and is the
paying
county
benefits.
paying 40% of the benefits as well?
No, just salary. We're paying all the benefits.
Member McGee, did I see your hand raised?
Oh, no.
Oh, okay. You just did it right there. Member Patrick.
But that doesn't equal 400,000 or whatever over this period of time.
No, there's other issues there, and I think I said, maybe it was my email today, that, you know, the judge needs to explain, I'm not sure the highway patrol tickets can account for that amount either. There have been other changes in the personnel, as I said. People were brought in under the new administration, which happens, at higher rates than what people before them had been making, and it just all adds up. It all adds up. And the fact is, we all have to live in a budget, within a budget, and so I don't know. I just think it's something. You know, I sent out the OML salary survey for comparisons of other salaries, and it's just something for you to think about.
Member Smedley, yes.
How quickly we forget.
Forgive me, my brain's a little.
Thank you, thank you.
old.
And I think I'm asking a similar question that's already been asked. I apologize if that's the case. Has it traditionally been that the court would only spend what it brings in? Or has it?
Not necessarily. We are obligated to help support, you know, but we are. The fact is, they have a second floor in City Hall, and, you know, all the utilities are paid and that kind of thing. So we are required to provide a municipal court. Now, I don't personally believe, and I'm not an attorney, but that means that we have to give them everything they want if we don't have the money. And that's where we are right now, having to. These changes have just really, I just haven't seen this in any other funds or spending or anything like that.
Member McGee.
I just want to make sure that I understand something. But first, I'd like to say that I know this particular person who's going to be appointed the clerk, and she's a wonderful worker, clerk, fantastic. So I think she's well worth the money. That's my 2 cents there on that point. But as I understand it, we're basically 400,000 in the hole for the court revenue, but you said that the diversion fees are up 368, and they're, am I right on that, that they're
That's how much
unencumbered?
money is sitting in that fund unappropriated, meaning
Right.
not spoken for to be spent on anything.
So my question is, what can it be spent on? Can it be spent all on salaries or anything that the court currently receives
It would
money
have to
from
be
us for?
related to the diversion program, I believe, but really the judge could tell you about that. And that's probably part of the issue, is that people are going into diversion and not through the other processes as far as court costs and fines are going down.
Member Pepe?
So then, all of this discussion leads me to revamping of the budget. We want diversion to work. That's why it was set up. Diversion is set up for that purpose. So it just seems to me that budget-wise, we really need to be looking at, if this is a trend, and we continue to use diversion, that the other side of the coin, being the larger court costs and those kind of things, maybe we really need to revamp the budget from prior years. And the other thing I'm hearing certainly is that there is a large discrepancy from 4 or 5 years running that we really need to address. I mean, you really are
Absolutely,
stating
we
that.
can't continue at this rate. This can't continue to happen and to operate and keep the personnel on in municipal court. There are 11 active personnel funds in the general fund. You know, that leaves less money for everybody, but we all have to do our part, and, you know, we need our share. Half the revenue or half the expenses in the general fund are police and fire, period. They always have been. The two of them add up to 50%. So then you have all the rest of the funds that are paid out of the general fund for the remaining money, remaining revenue.
Member Butler.
Thank you. But if I did hear you correctly, Auditor Heck, you did acknowledge that income tax is up, that the 1.8% is what you said.
Yes.
Okay.
But that's a very small percentage to be up.
I mean, if you had to split that through all the funds, that would never cover the amount that,
No, it wouldn't cover even just the raises. We give 2% raises typically. And I think that's the discussion that's out there now. So all the non-union people will be getting 2%. Police and fire will be getting different amounts because of their union contracts. That money is barely enough to meet increasing costs from one year to the next. 2.5% to 3% is what would be ideal from one year to the next to keep us a little ahead of the game. 1.8 is not enough to keep things, to continue the way we're going without making some cuts.
Any other comment? Your Honor, would you care to?
I can update a little bit on the
Okay.
auditor address. So a couple of issues that were raised by Auditor Heck. The new position that she was referencing is not a new position. It is the replacement for Tanya Dodd, who is going to be is the new clerk. So we have two positions that we are advertising currently, and they are to replace the chief deputy clerk, who retired, and to replace Tanya's position now that she has moved to the clerk position. What I was doing with the budget is I was redesigning that position so that it would be half a diversion position, taking actually out of the general fund half of what was being paid previously for that position. I'm also not giving raises to everybody. In fact, I'm cutting almost every position that has come in has been at a reduction from any previous position that was there. So coming in for the position to replace Tanya, we're expecting to pay at roughly $15 an hour, what we discussed about 2 years ago when I came in and talked to City Council last time. So it'll be a reduction. In fact, the overall budget is very close to what the projected budget was, despite the fact that we have had to add a whole position for our person who was running the intensive probation program, who was grant funded, and that those funds have dried up from the state. And so we have built that into the budget. But by reducing the amount that we would pay the chief deputy clerk, and reducing what we would pay the clerk, and reducing what we would pay that additional position that was Tanya's position previously, it is a savings to almost make up for the fact that we're covering a position that is expensive, but it's providing a needed resource for the court. Intensive probation program, by the way, is the resource when we have people that are generally repeat or violent offenders, but not so much so that they need to be incarcerated. And this is our intermediate step. We assign them to an intensive probation program so that they do not have to be incarcerated to keep them from harming other people. Without him there, we wouldn't have the ability to have that supervised probation period. So we need it. So we need to have that built into the budget. We also had from 14 and 15, the DUI court lost grant funding. So that's one of the issues that was there. There also was, there were 2 positions that were not filled, that were filled at the end of Judge Grimm's term, that are still there. So we have, and when we replaced the DUI court manager, the new person came in at $15 an hour instead of at roughly $20, $21 an hour. We're trying in all the ways that we can, but the funds are drying up from the state. And we also don't have the numbers of cases from largely, although not exclusively, highway patrol. And I can't do anything about that. And there's nothing that we can really address as far as the money from the revenue that was coming in. I don't think it's coming back. I think they have a change in what their priorities are, and I don't think they're going to charge as many cases. But as we discussed earlier, that's not the labor hours for the clerks. The clerks need to get the work done, and that's why we have the staff that we do. Is there anything else? Does anybody have any questions?
Any questions from council?
So I would just add,
Happy.
if the grant funding that we've lost from the state, let's be clear, that comes from the state of Ohio.
And we've applied for replacement grants. We haven't heard back on it yet, but we've applied.
Do you have like some type of a ballpark figure on what you've lost in grant funding over the last couple of years?
That was about $70,000 for that particular grant.
Okay.
It was right around that. I don't have the exact number at hand.
Okay.
The other one that was for DUI court was around $50,000
Okay.
that had been lost, and we don't have those. A lot of these others are when we gave the raises at the beginning of 16 and when we hired in the new position, that was roughly $100,000. The diversion coordinator has been fully covered, and there's enough extra there that I thought it was appropriate to split the new clerk or the replacement clerk position to have that clerk focus on doing the diversion work and pay them instead of through the general fund, through the diversion fund. So that's working as we had hoped it would for the diversion program. So I don't think that those are coming back, even though we've applied for it. The trend right now is that the grants are less available.
And then you said you added the intensive probation officer, which
That's in the general fund now. We didn't
Right.
add the position, it's been there.
Okay, but it was paid some other way?
It was.
Okay, so in my brain, I'm kind of tallying, I'm not an accountant, but it's kind of getting up there.
Yeah, almost all of it is accounted through what we did with the raises that we did at the beginning of 16.
Okay,
The hiring of the position, even though that one was covered, there was a person who had been doing part-time through the diversion program, and her salary is not covered by diversion anymore because she's not doing the diversion work. So there is an employee that was partially paid through diversion that no longer is. And then we have the loss of revenue from the reduced caseload.
so I don't really want to sound like Member Fall on this soapbox, but here's another example of a state mandated, a municipal court has to be at a municipal level. We have to have a municipal court, that's a state law, and yet the funding streams are slowly being taken back on
Right.
programming that everyone has gotten used to, communities have expected, taxpayers want certain things like diversion, especially with our opiate crisis and all of that. Treatment, diversion means treatment, yet we have to begin to pay for this more and more out of our general funds, which is our tax dollar.
Right, that is all correct. The only other real option is one that I have been working with the Supreme Court for some of their task force about addressing the court costs, and we have authority to raise court costs. It's just the wrong move. It hurts the people that have the least money, and the Chief Justice is really trying to get courts that have higher court costs. We're not high. We're not the lowest, but we're not high. But she is very much trying to get courts that have high court costs to lower them. I do not want us to be going the other direction. I don't want us to be raising our court costs.
Madam President?
So I'll preface it by saying what your office does, what the court system does, is incredibly important to our community. But I hear, and I feel like I'm still trying to get a grasp of the budget situation, because what I hear from the auditor, though, is we all work for the city, for the citizens. And so we're also charged with arriving at a budget that's workable during the year. If I don't mean to misquote you, but I heard that the continuing trend of loss of revenues is we can't continue to support that kind of loss in the general revenue fund. And so I'm unsure where we are, if we need additional discussion. I heard that there's been some conversation between offices.
Not recently.
But not recently. So I don't know if,
Well, I think there's two issues here. The issue before us is the clerk and the salary, $65,000.
Mm-hmm.
The second issue is this deficit that needs to be addressed and corrected because it's having a direct impact upon our general fund, which does not have the revenues coming in to sustain it.
Right.
I think that's our issue. So we need to deal with our first topic, and then we definitely need to sit down and work on the second. Does that sound reasonable?
I would feel a lot more comfortable with that process. This is of presiding over this, because I know this is your vote and your decision on this, moving forward, but knowing that there's going to be some longer-term discussion about the general revenue.
Let's see. Mr. Costas.
Thank you.
I have a comment.
So we've been able to see that the numbers have been trending down. The revenue has been trending down over. Is that something that you expect is going to continue to happen?
I don't know that it will continue to go down. I don't expect it to go up. At the recent Bar Association meeting, there was a representative who works with the Highway Patrol, and they have shifted their focus. Instead of writing as many tickets, they are focused a lot more on drug interdiction to catch people moving drugs. And that is, I don't think he was indicating that they were going to continue to reduce the focus on tickets. I think that change has already been done. I don't know that, but that seemed to be the indication he was giving to the attorneys that were present and the judges that were present at the Bar Association meeting. Mm-hmm. I don't expect it to go back up, though.
Okay.
Member Butler.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank Auditor Hecht as well as Judge Grace for being here and taking time to communicate and educate us. But I want to acknowledge that Judge Grace was here to discuss the hire and the employee request. Mm-hmm. And I want to clarify that I heard him correctly, and that was acknowledging that the employee that's replacing, that will be with a new title, is taking $10,000 less than the predecessor.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
And that was a conversation and a process that she was involved in the process and came to the number together, determined that was the appropriate number for the position with the amount of experience and with her background.
And historically, we've budgeted for the position to have a larger amount.
Yes, the clerk, by ordinance or by at least what has been approved through budget, is set currently at almost $75,000.
Thank you.
Mayor.
Just a simple question. Did the granting mechanisms go away, or were you just not awarded on a grant that you put forward to reapplied for another grant?
One of the grants was changing, one of them completely went away, and the one that was changing, we have reapplied under the replacement grant, and that's the one we've not heard back yet.
Member Fall.
This is just a quick comment. I worry when we're talking about whether the fees charged by the court is keeping up with the different types of funding that is needed by the court, because you get into situations where you read about it in the newspaper that, the court has to arrest people because they need money to run the court. And I think that on a social justice issue, that is the way bad road to go down. And I think we just need to recognize that to a certain degree when we're talking about reduction or increases of tickets, that is seen, and we understand that could be an issue. So, thank you.
We should not ever let that become an issue. And I know that our local law enforcement does not have any desire for that to be an issue either, and neither does the court.
I want everybody out in TV land to know that too, so.
Okay, well, let's wrap this up. We'll have an ordinance brought forward. I don't think tonight, but even though we are having a special session. So. All right, moving on to something really interesting, credit card policy. Apparently, well, not apparently, we do. I mean, the city has to have a policy concerning the many departments that have credit cards. I know that many of the departments already do, but I don't think we have a citywide policy as of yet. That's why we're here. Anyone care to speak to that?
Well, I can start, and then the auditor can pick it up. Auditor Hecht is the one who alerted us to House Bill 312, which, the bill summary is basically requires political subdivisions except counties to follow procedures for the use of credit cards, including adopting a policy, conducting a quarterly quarterly review, and in some cases provide itemized receipts to the political subdivision's fiscal officer, and it goes on and on. Prohibits the use of debit cards by political subdivisions for any purchases other than law enforcement. I'm just cherry picking through this piece of legislation, but
we have
again, in being proactive as to when this bill takes effect, and Auditor Hecht, hopefully you can fill us in on that, if it's the beginning of the year or it's getting ahead and having a credit card policy in place for HB 312.
Yes, something is going to go through, and it will be effective, I think, January 31st of next year. However, I would like us to try to do this by the end of the year so that all the departments can be in line and working off of this policy from day one, because there are some requirements for this policy that include review of charges monthly. Some of these things I know I'm challenging and other entities, and we're trying to change, but most of these things are going to happen. It's just going to be, how are we going to pick our control officer, how often it's going to be reviewed by council, the legislative body, and things like that. So it's going to happen, and I just thought tonight you might want to know we have about 10 credit cards floating around the city, and over the years I've tried, 3 are in one department, I will say that, but over the years, the auditors have asked about policies, and I have policies for about half of those from a few departments, but not all of them. So we've never had everybody on the same page. One of the other things has to do with keeping credit cards in a central location, which we do not. The departments have their credit cards, and so there'll be some big changes, and we have to decide how we want to handle that. When you have a department in charge of their own credit card, police and fire in particular, as you know, they're sort of paramilitary, but they're very strict. They have sign-out procedures for their cards. No one else has that. I don't have that in my office. The only card we have is actually in my name. But as opposed to, and I'm not saying this has not worked over the years, but the mayor's office uses their cards for all of the departments under them rather than everyone having their own credit card, except for police and fire. So they come in very handy, and I think we want to continue using that, especially for travel and training and ordering purposes in this day and age. But there's just a lot of things, you know, the maximum spending limits. I don't know what those are for anybody, you know, haven't set an amount that you can't have more than this amount on your credit card, available credit, and things like that. So it's a little bit complicated. I've made some notes, but it will have to be discussed, I think, with the administration. And Clerk of Council has been helpful. We don't want a policy in place that is going to limit us and make us unable to use it for things that we use it for. I know that council, especially the government channel, uses you know, the credit card for things, and so we want to make sure that all of those things are covered one way or another, because it's services besides just items, and it's also been used, it's discussed in the new policy, but or some of our old policies, but we also, it's used for license fees and maintenance, things like that. So we need to be specific about what we want and make sure that we list everything so that we can still use it the way we've been using it. And then, you know, we're going to have a you know, an official who, you know, regulates, pays attention, or whatever. We'll have to figure out. But the idea is, if we have a policy in place, then we can use that when it comes in. I think we have to have a policy by the end of January anyway. But like I said, I think it would be wise to get everybody using this, especially if we're going to have reports reviewed. That we want to start that before, because if we don't have a policy until January or February, and then, you know, we're supposed to show you January reports, then we have to go back and figure out who did what and whether it's in line with our new policy. So it really should be in place ahead of time. So I don't know if anybody has any thoughts about that, if they've looked at some of this. Like I said, types of expenses, officers in positions that are allowed to use it. You know, that's tough, but I suppose we can just get them all in there, because like for training, my card is used for training for other people in the office besides me. So other larger departments like police and fire would need more description there to cover whoever needs to use that card.
And often it's multiple people going to training, so it's
right.
Multiple firefighters or police officers that are all on using the same card.
Yeah.
Questions? Lenny?
So yeah, if anybody has any thoughts after looking at it's on page 11 in that big bill is where it lists them, and then if you read on about some of the other things that you know, a compliance officer and things like that. So 11, 12, maybe on to 13, but
One question, I actually have a couple. You said there's about 10 cards floating around, and they're all bank cards, or are they store cards?
well, those are the bank cards that I know about, and I
Okay.
will be honest, and this is something that I've written on my list of questions to ask. We have a lot of departments who have accounts at various businesses all around town, and not even necessarily in town. They can be like a uniform order place. So I'm thinking this isn't the case, but I don't know for sure. Say the Staples and Lowe's cards are considered credit cards, or they're just credit accounts, and that's something we need to find out about. Just every department has Staples, and almost every department has Lowe's.
With the bank cards, are they all with the same bank?
No.
Wouldn't it be better if they were all under the same bank?
Probably, but you know, that just isn't the way it happened.
I mean, it'd be easier to control that way.
Yeah.
I mean, my wife and I have a card, and she goes on the internet and sees what I'm charging all the time, tells me about it, you know? She goes, what's this thing here?
Checks and balances.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the bottom line is all the bills get paid through my office, so we see everything, and we do
Right.
question things and challenge things.
Right.
But no, they're not at the same bank.
Okay.
Two different banks have issued those cards.
And the other question is, I know I brought this up before, just talking with you, is that it's one thing to have a credit card in your wallet or in the desk drawer, and you go and you sign it out and you say, I'm going to Staples and I'm going to buy some paper. Fine. It's another thing entirely when you have a Staples account set up on the computer with the credit card number already embedded there for anyone who comes to the computer to order a box of paper. Now, I don't see much control there. And the issue is, it's not so much dealing with that computer in the office. The fact is, it's on the internet, which means I can go home and make the order. I can go to an internet cafe and make the order. All I need to do is get into that account. What I'm worried about is I don't see how that can be policed. I don't see how that can be controlled. I don't know, frankly, how to prevent that. I mean,
I don't either. I've had my credit cards compromised by Target, for example, when they had their big breach, and I've gotten letters about other ones. I've not had any issues, but yeah, I'm not sure how to control that either.
I mean, is there a policy that says, no, you can't do that? I mean, you can take the card and go to Staples, but no, you can't order it over the internet.
We're in a difficult position.
Now, I know you can't do that because here in council, that's how the government channel buys its equipment.
Sure.
Okay, it doesn't go to Staples and buy it. It gets them off of, I don't know, tigerdirect.com or something like that.
Oh, sure. It's like, say, police and fire uniforms. You can't just go out somewhere in Athens and buy those.
Mm-hmm.
And those are ordered. A lot of things are. We've got one foot in the door and one foot still in the old style way. And this is true for all of us, that we try to move forward electronically, making things easier, but as far as the controls, they're not there, and so every time you start doing that, then the state or somebody says, well, no, you need to keep all those paper copies, and, the auditors ask us for that stuff. We're trying to do document scanning and save on paper and files, and yet they want paper copies of everything, and so it's really tough.
Well, if you're doing it electronically, there may not be a paper copy.
Right.
What? Here's some
And
digits.
we can't control, like you said, if we go on to Lowe's, if their, distribution center gets compromised, we can't control if someone finds our numbers and, yeah. So I don't know what to tell you. I just know that this probably came about because a few people, took advantage, used their credit cards for things they shouldn't have, and I would say that's never been an issue in Athens. Like I said, we review all the credit bills pretty closely. I have challenged some charges, and I've denied a couple things over the years. I don't very often, but, that's my job. And so they don't really take advantage. But it is really hard, and the other part about it is they're going to stop issuing credit cards. They've already stopped in under like City of Athens or clerk of or council, city council, and they want people's names on there and they want people's personal information, and so it ends up coming back on me as the finance officer. Okay, do I give them my social security number for everybody's credit card that they're using around town? So,
but I thought corporations were people now, so I mean,
well, we have issues with that, and even with the
here?
credit accounts at the stores, they want information. I know Paula has worked with me with people giving their. I don't think they should have to. At least I'm bonded. But when a supervisor or someone goes to open an account at a store and they want his social security number, I just don't think they should. It's just really difficult. Like I said, it's kind of going. It's just getting difficult to even have credit. But then again, a lot of hotels don't want cash, and they don't want you bringing a check from your entity. They want you to scan a card. So when we go to stay, yeah.
Okay, so I know that most businesses had to go through a change here recently where we don't handle the cards a lot. This doesn't speak at all to the city accepting people's credit cards for payment. We don't do that, right? We don't. Well,
actually, we do, but this has nothing to do with that. This is us using cards.
Okay.
Employees using cards.
And this is just for clarification also, is it a blanket term, credit card? Does that include debit cards? Do we use debit cards? Are we just credit cards?
Just credit cards.
We're just
Well,
credit.
I mean, I could read the definition for you. The bill defines credit card to include any bank-issued credit card, store-issued credit card, or any other card allowing the holder to purchase goods or services on credit, and expressly excludes any procurement card, gasoline card, telephone card, or any other card where the merchant category codes are in place in a system of control for the use of that card.
Okay, so a debit card comes from a checking account. Usually, that's usually.
For law enforcement purposes only, but I don't even know.
No, we don't have any debit cards.
Okay.
There's nobody
Okay.
taking money directly out of any of our accounts without our authorization.
There we go.
Sure hope
Okay.
not.
And then I guess, the final one is what, I mean, it seems like a good idea that we should have policies in place. Why is the state thinking that we need to be that everybody needs to be doing this?
Well, I think what I think is that a lot of people don't have policies in place. And like I said, we don't have a citywide policy in place, and not every department that has cards has a policy.
Okay.
So it's a good idea to have policies, but we don't even have them for everybody who uses them in the city.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay, we'll get us a policy.
Keep working on it.
Thank you, Auditor.
Last but not least, 2018 budget.
More good news?
I don't know. Anyone care to talk to about it?
We're still working our way through it. We're getting closer. We've been putting a lot of work into this budget, and again, sitting down with each of the department heads and going through their budget, and in particular looking at what their capital improvements might be, and having to pull some back and authorizing others. So, and Member Reisner, you've sat in quite a few of these, if not all of the budget meetings, as has the auditor, doing things a little bit differently these days, where we're all sitting at the table together and going through, after Service Safety Director and I have sat down with the department heads and working through. So we're getting closer. We're just working on it this afternoon with some of the last areas within the budget. But as you can imagine, the budget is huge.
Yes, I can imagine that. Oh, no, I don't imagine. I know it is. So. Questions, Council? About the budget process, how things are going? Are we
I
going to be
believe
broke
we'll
next
be
year?
ready to have the first reading at that first meeting in December, and a little more detailed review, as it were, at the next committee meeting. Some of the changes most recently were increasing the medical allowance for individuals. Am I saying it correctly, Tony? By a hefty spike in order to cover those expenses, and we think that'll be adequate.
Okay. Well, nothing else. That concludes this committee.
Okay. We'll move on to transportation, chaired by Councilmember Pappy.
Thank you. And we have more money to discuss. Transportation members, committee members, we received an email. And this is the closeout for our Union Street project. And I think everything is up and running at this point, including the kiosks, correct?
They are up and running.
Okay. So the final project cost is expected to be $222,520. And administration is requesting an authorization of $62,520.
Additionally?
Additionally. No, that is
No.
in the 222,000.
Correct.
Right. This is from the original cost, which
Okay,
was
thank
I remember it being like 160 something.
It was 160.
Yeah, when we started. So we're talking about changes during construction, but then you also have a comment here, the design firm also has additional expenses for completing plan revisions of $2,225. So that was an additional cost of the plans that the firm added. Structural slab replacement of $27,000, which was the installation of the conduit for future fiber optic, which I thought was involved in the beginning estimate, and traffic signal use. Additional sidewalk removal and replacement in order to obtain as much curb reveal as possible. Bollards were added to protect the parking pay stations. So, the earlier ordinance was $30,000 from the Athens Enhancement Fund, $250, $192,500 from the Street Fund, $220. Okay, now am I not doing my math here? The ordinance needs to appropriate an additional $62,520 from $220. So, questions from council? There was a lot of additional money there to digest, but I guess there's not a lot we can do at this point. The work is done.
Well, and one of the big things, as you mentioned a minute ago, was, we're a city that's 220 years old. Sometimes there's unknowns or unidentifieds underground, and so the slab, the $27,000 slab replacement, that was on the Follets, where the Follets is. That building, again, when renovation started taking place, realizing that there was a rather large vault that extended all the way out to the curb, and so when that happened, we ended up having to re-engineer and put a slab, concrete slab, to protect that.
There was a tank that was found.
That wasn't part of this project, although there was a tank found with the fire, sure, that was when the reinforcement superstructure went up to hold up, I believe it's 16 West Union. But, the big item is that, and so this is closing out this particular project. The other things that happened that were kind of unforeseens at the time were to put the ballards in front of the kiosk to protect the kiosk, kind of harden them in case a vehicle were to veer off of the road and run into the thing. That would not be a good thing. The other was a change order that came down where it would be northeast corner in front of Witt's. There were two lamp posts that weren't in line with the new lamp posts. They were kind of sitting in where they originally were. And looking at those, that didn't make any sense, and so that was a change that had to take place as well, to have all those, the old existing lamp posts in line with the new lamp posts. So again, there were changes. I think we typically see that with projects, but this is to close it out on what otherwise, I think, everything I've heard in terms of the improvements have been nice improvements. And to answer the question about the kiosks are live on the 6th of November. I believe somewhere around that time point we did have the variable message signboard up there indicating to everyone that now that stretch of street is being enforced again, where it hadn't been for a long time, because we're trying to get this stuff to all come in line and get the kiosks on. So kiosks are there, the signage is there as well for the parking spaces.
I have a question. You've added four maybe parking spots there next to Bromley Hall. Do they utilize the kiosks up the street?
They can, and Park Mobile.
And Park Mobile.
There's also parking spaces that have been added, and you've probably recognized these, next to BW3s on Richland Avenue South, the north head of Richland Avenue. So there's been additional spaces. And a lot of that came out of, again, the concern going back to February of 2016 that we're going to lose parking spaces. So we started looking, okay, where can we add parking spaces? And so this project has actually grown parking spaces in the uptown area as opposed to retracted parking spaces.
Compact car, correct.
Member Smedley?
Thank you.
I don't know.
I would just like to second administration's comments that this project has received a lot of compliments. It was very well done. Given these increases in what was budgeted, how do you foresee these impacting these particular line items through the end of the year? Are you going to need to cut back on other projects, or is it small enough that it's able to adjust?
Yeah, this is largely out of the street fund, and you know, we're kind of in that mode of winding down through the end of the year remaining. I mean, all street repaving has taken place, a lot of things related to streets. We've accomplished those, and so the funding's there. We'll just wrap this particular project up.
And do we have any other items for transportation?
No, ma'am, thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to special session. And our first item of business will be to establish the quorum, and all members of council are present. We'll now have ordinances for third reading. The first one being Ordinance 10817, an ordinance amending Athens City Code, Title 3, Administrative Provisions, Chapter 3.07, Administrative Departments, Boards and Commissions, to add Section 3.07.76 to establish the Athens City Affordable Housing Commission. And this is introduced by all members of council. And you'll speak to it, Councilmember Butler.
I move that we adopt 10817.
Second.
We've talked about this quite a lot. It comes out of the committee, the task force, that the city and various members of the public and Ohio University worked on for over a year. And this will enable the city to move forward with partners, forming partnerships that can help address one of the largest issues right now in the city of Athens, affecting everything from quality of life to economic development, and that's our housing stock and our need for affordable housing. I'd like to say specifically that I wanted to bring this forward as a testament to Michelle's work that she did on the task force and being a driving force for these many years for affordable housing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We have a motion and second for approval of Ordinance 10817. Do we have any other comments or questions? Councilmember Butler.
Thank you. I'll just briefly acknowledge my praise and gratitude as well to Councilmember Pappy, as well as former President McDavis and our current mayor and Mayor Weil for continuing to support those discussions between the two entities. I think it's paramount. Again, I applaud Councilmember Pappy's for her stay at it attitude. Thank you.
Persistence.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right.
Just one other comment.
Councilmember Smedley.
Thank you. I also am looking forward to what solutions might come out of this commission. I am hopeful that the focus will remain broad enough to include all housing issues, not strictly on moderate income as was initially intended for this commission. I was pleased to hear Member Pappy reading the mission from the report, which was a much more broader focus. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what recommendations they bring to council.
Okay.
Thanks.
Great. Thank you. All right. We have a motion and second for approval of Ordinance 10817. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 12017 is an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into an LPA state project agreement with the Ohio Department of Transportation for lighting upgrade and replacement on East State Street and declaring an emergency. This is introduced by Councilmember Pappy.
Thank you. I move to adopt 12017.
Second.
as I'll recall, this is another piece to the puzzle of the East State Street improvements, and this is for strictly for the agreement. The state of Ohio is taking 100% of the cost, but they need the agreement from the city that we approve this lighting upgrade.
We have a motion and second for approval of ordinance 12017. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. We now have a series of ordinances for second reading. Ordinance 11817 is an ordinance amending ordinance 9914, establishing fees as required by the Athens City Code, introduced by Councilmember Fall. Ordinance 12217 is an ordinance granting variances from the Athens City subdivision regulations to diversified properties for the Madison Heights minor subdivision located on the corner of East State Street and Madison Avenue to allow lot splits. This is introduced by Councilmember Fall. Ordinance 12317 is an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title 7, Traffic Code, Chapters 7.03, Passengers, Operators, Accidents, and 7.09, Penalties, introduced by Councilmember Fall. Ordinance 12417 is an ordinance amending Title 29, Housing Regulations, Chapter 29.03, Rental, Dwelling, and Housing Permit, Section 29.03.08.1, Tenant Occupant Education Form, and Section 29.03.09, Display of Permit, introduced by Councilmember Fall. Ordinance 12517 is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into or to extend the agreement with the Board of Athens County Commissioners for the purpose of obtaining the services of the Public Defender's Office through December 31st, 2018, introduced by Councilmember Reisner. Ordinance 12617 is an ordinance authorizing the law director to hire a legal secretary to, at a pay rate of 50% through the assigned pay grade, introduced by Councilmember Reisner. Ordinance 12717 is an ordinance amending Ordinance 417, reallocating revenues from the city income tax and declaring an emergency. This is introduced by the Finance and Personnel Committee. Ordinance 12817 is an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to suspend temporarily the fee for parking at metered spaces in the municipal parking garage and declaring an emergency, introduced by Councilmember Pappy. Ordinance 12917 is an ordinance suspending Athens City Code, Section 7.05.03, continuous parking in the same location from Sunday, December 17th, 2017 through midnight on Sunday, January 1st, 2018, and declaring an emergency. This is introduced by Councilmember Pappy.
Bah humbug.
Ordinance 13217 is an ordinance providing for the issuance of $250,000 of notes by the City of Athens, Ohio, in anticipation of the issuance of bonds for the purpose of renewing notes previously issued to pay part of the cost of improvements to this municipality's wastewater treatment plant, and declaring an emergency. This is introduced by Councilmember Reisner. Ordinance 13317 is an ordinance providing for the issuance of $325,000 of notes by the City of Athens, Ohio, in anticipation of the issuance of bonds for the purpose of renewing notes issued for the purpose of paying part of the cost of design engineering of the water treatment plant facilities improvements project 307 and declaring an emergency. This is introduced by Councilmember Reisner. And now we'll have the ordinances for first reading. 13417 is an ordinance to rezone the Madison Heights minor subdivision property located on the corner of East State Street and Madison Avenue, and is introduced by Councilmember Fall.
This is the particular ordinance that we had the public meeting at the beginning of our time tonight. So basically it's through when you subdivide or when you annex, you have to apply a zoning to the new resulting legal entity, the subdivision or the new property. And this will go to have a B zone made into a R1 zone, and 2 R3 zones also of the subdivided properties. The one and another R1 zone with an easement for open space. And we heard earlier in the second reading that there has also been variances to go along with the particular subdivision, and this has all been through the Planning Commission on their recommendation. The change of zoning is also in line with our comprehensive plan for this particular neighborhood. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ordinance 13517 is an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title III, Administrative Provisions, Chapter 3.11, Domestic Registry, Section 3.11.01, Definitions, and Section 3.11.02, Domestic Partnership Criteria, introduced by Councilmember Fall.
Thank you. Once again, we talked to this earlier this evening. It's updating our domestic partnership program that we have in the city that has been in place long before marriage equality even existed in Athens, in Ohio, part of Athens being a progressive, inclusive city. And this is strengthening some of the language and making it more in line with other communities in Ohio. Thank you.
Thank you. Ordinance 13617 is an ordinance amending the 2017 appropriation ordinance, and this is introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. Allow me to read what these ordinance will do. Section 1, the 2017 appropriation ordinance 15016 is hereby amended by appropriating from the unappropriated balance the following sums: $20,000 to General Fund Municipal Court 101-106 TC 300 for process servicing fees, $8,000 to Transportation Fund 214 TC 200 for gas and oil, $21,000 to Parking Garage Fund 730 TC 600 for transfer, and $140,000 to Sewer Debt Fund 758 TC 600 for transfer pursuant to Ordinance 013017 and 013117, and increasing the total appropriations by said amount. Section 2, the auditor is hereby authorized to make the following interfund transfers: from Water Fund 740 to Water Debt Fund 744, amount $305,000. Parking Garage Fund 730 to Parking Garage Debt Fund 733, $21,000. Section 3, the 2017 Appropriation Ordinance 15016 is further amended by appropriating from the unappropriated balance the sum of $21,000 to Parking Garage Debt Fund 733 TC 400, and increasing the appropriations by said amount.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ordinance 13717 is an ordinance amending Ordinance 617, authorizing sidewalk enhancements on West Union Street, project number 305, and amending the 2017 appropriation ordinance. And I do believe we need to suspend because we have some payments due within 30 days.
Move to suspend 13717.
Second.
Due to the fact that this project has been ongoing for some time and we do need to pay the contractors, we do ask for the suspension.
Okay, we have a motion and second for suspending the rules on 13717. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. The rules have been suspended.
I move to adopt 13717.
Second.
So we discussed this earlier in committee, and we understand that the funds are available to finish off the completion of this, and it was an additional $62,000 plus change over what we had initially appropriated at $160,000, which is a lot, but there are unforeseen things that happen in construction as well. So that's what I say about that.
We have a motion and second for approval of 13717. Any other comments or questions?
I'll just
Councilmember Butler.
Thank you briefly. I appreciate the mayor's vision on Union Street. I know he took some scrutiny over this process, and I appreciate that he was welcome to community input and feedback. And I know we are critical as a body up here at times, but I think in the long run, we have a nicer pedestrian-friendly space, which I do applaud. Thank you.
I would just add that as well to your comment that I know I was one of the biggest critics at the beginning, and but I think in the end the compromise has been an excellent compromise, and the fact that we will be generating further revenue with the additional, I don't know how many spaces did we create there. We had 4 at near Bromley.
We picked up about 8 spaces.
About 8 spaces. So in the end, with all of the conversation and discussion and study of the area, I think we ended up with a better product in the end. So
There was collaboration among the private uptown people who own the buildings. Everybody else.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and second for approval of ordinance 13717. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn for this evening.
Second.
Okay. Now, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned at 8:36 p.m. and we'll see you all next Monday night. Thank you.